climate change has huge costs now. I have no time for folks who are like, we shouldn't take action.
The loss of human civilization is not a far-fetched threat.
The facts around climate change are fairly well established. It's not a debate.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. How dare you?
When it comes to the environment and climate change, it feels like we're constantly being lectured by journalists, politicians, and activists. We're told that our way of life is unsustainable, that we only have a few years to act, and that we're facing an existential crisis, not just as a country, but as a species and a planet. We're told that the science is settled, and that any dissident thinking is akin to Holocaust denial. It goes something like this. The Earth's temperature is rapidly rising. This is caused by human activity, namely the burning of fossil fuels which produce carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The solution, therefore, must be to stop producing CO2, not to try to mitigate the damage, adapt to our changing surroundings, or create the economic conditions to allow scientists and innovators to do what they do best and start solving the problem. No. Instead, the settled solution is for authoritative, top-down action from governments. And some activists don't just call for reducing emissions or becoming carbon neutral. They call for a complete ban on CO2.
To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years.
Just to be clear about what she's calling for, this would be an end to our civilization as we know it, an end to everything we use to power it. And keep that in mind when you see journalists celebrating Greta or politicians groveling at her feet. She is one of the most radical voices in our society, and she's been given an enormous platform to throw her temper tantrum and demand that we destroy everything about our society simply because she believes it's bad. In Canada, this ideology has led governments to shut down coal plants, introduce heavy-handed regulations that destroy jobs in industry, and impose a national carbon tax. And those who oppose any of this get their name dragged through the mud and become the victim of character assassinations and vicious name-calling. When information comes out that challenges this narrative, it's buried and hidden. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, known as the IPCC, has gotten it wrong in the past. The reports predict apocalyptic consequences for mankind, but these reports are often riddled with errors and have flawed modeling that vastly overestimate the problem. The IPCC, much like other global institutions, has become a highly charged political organization, pushing its own ideology and manipulating the debate. So what could be done about all this? Where does this leave those of us who care about the environment, believe in conservation, and want to protect the planet from pollution and degradation, but we don't quite subscribe to the hysteria, alarmism, and environmentalist ideology? The theme that kept repeating itself throughout our research was the hypocrisy, the do as I say, not as I do mentality that is so prevalent in the movement, which is why we decided to call this series Green Hypocrisy. In the first episode, we explore the origins of the carbon tax and seek to understand its purpose and how effective it is at reducing emissions. Episode 2 takes a closer look at the environmental movement, the activists themselves, who is funding them, and how the movement has evolved from the early days of environmentalism. Episode 3 looks at a case study exposing jaw-dropping corruption, pollution, and the poisoning of the natural environment, and how these actions have been enabled and funded by the Government of Canada and other international institutions. Finally, Episode 4 explores green energy policies, so-called clean energy initiatives, and the industries and individuals profiting off of ideological politicians and their elusive quests for energy utopia. Well, that's what this investigative documentary series is all about. We explore the policies, the activists, the organizations, the governments, the international institutions, and the global climate lobby to try to understand whether they are actually working for the good of the planet or whether they're motivated by something else altogether. This original series features investigative reporting, new information, exclusive interviews, and bombshell revelations about the industry behind the climate change movement. During this series, we peel back the layers of the onion and expose to you, the viewer, why it is okay to be skeptical of the climate alarmists. It's okay to challenge their ideology and to oppose their heavy-handed prescriptions. And it's okay to stand up for our industries and be proud of the energy we produce.